that in land-based expedition is very important. Remember, you will be leaving, like it or not, believe it or not, in less than a week. Everyone around will know what you're doing. Everyone. Unexpected things happening quite often. In the meantime that they go to a proper conservation center. Why do I say this? No, but thanks to that we did the job. Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will be talking about how to prepare an archaeological expedition going to work on shipwrecks. So let's dive into it. We have talked in many episodes about expeditions and what we do in the expeditions, but we realized that we haven't talked about how to prepare an expedition. And I'm sure that many of you that are watching the channel, you have been, you are, or you will be in a position to prepare an expedition at a certain point in time or to participate in an expedition. So every piece of knowledge I could contribute to because of my experience, I think it would be a good thing to have. I mean, not that everything that I would say here is necessarily the way you will do it, but at least you know that there was another guy who did it and maybe it didn't work for you or it didn't work for me, and I would let you know that. So first, let's make a big separation here. In a general way, there are two types of these kind of expeditions, which I want to separate because I will talk about them separately. One is the land-based expedition, so an expedition that happens when you are based on land. And the other one is the offshore expedition, where you live 99% of the time in a ship. Offshore, on board, living an expedition prepared in that sense. So today we will talk about the land-based expedition, an expedition based in land, because they are much more common. People tend to see these expeditions as a cheaper option. You will see with the time that it's not. But we will talk today about land-based expeditions. Okay, I have prepared a little list of points in which I want to not to miss any of them. So if you see me looking by the side, it's because I'm watching the computer so I don't jump over one of the subjects. So first, the land-based expeditions are the ones that, as the name says, you are working from land, but people choose them, or you have to choose them if your target, your shipwreck or the area you will explore are close enough to land that allow for going every day to the place and back, and they are reasonably close to your landing point or your boarding point, a place in which you will have your tenders, your little ships, your boats, and that you can board and land after the day of work. Because there are plenty of cases in which you have an area to explore or a shipwreck to work, which are close enough to land, but they are very far from any shelter or any place. So it actually, even if it's close to land, you need to have an offshore expedition. You need to have a boat, a living on board facility to be able to work that place. So
I wonder, because many times the shipwrecks might be close to land, but not necessarily close to civilization or to a setup. So you guys need to have the ability to do everything from the boat and live on the boat without having to go to land to replenish that often, I assume.
exactly. If you have a land-based expedition, you normally need to go, you need to go every day back after the work, back to land, because you don't have a place to sleep or to cook food and to fill up your bottles. So everything is inland. So you have to go back to land. It's convenient that that point is not that far from the wreck. I mean, that
Correct.
depends on every operator. What do you consider far or close enough? What
Yeah.
your boats or your tenders, your little boats are capable, which autonomy they have, which speed they have, and how hard you want to make it for yourself. So this is the first aspect is to consider if because of the area or the wreck that you will work, which type of expedition you will choose. If it will be land-based or if it will be an offshore expedition living on board. The second one that you will need to face, and this I will not stay too long in this point because that is probably a subject for a complete other episode, is licenses. The licenses, the permits, you need to do that work. I will not get into the nitty-gritty details, but this is a long subject. But yes, you need a license, you need a permit, concession, contract, you call it the way you call it. It is also difficult to explain this point because this varies a lot from country to country, from province to
Expedition
province.
to expedition.
Expedition to expedition, year to year. And
Yeah.
in that permit, in that license that you will apply, there are normally two different types. And this, I mention it now because it will depend also in what I will say about the expedition itself, is which type of license you are applying for. If it's an exploration license and survey, so to go and look to discover shipwrecks that haven't been found, or that you have an idea where it is, or you have information that there is a shipwreck but it hasn't been located, it hasn't been surveyed. That is a survey license. It has some characteristics, and there is the excavation license, which is the license that you get when you already know the shipwreck, where it is, that is important, that you want to excavate. So these are two different types of licenses. That is important for what we will say during the video. So licenses and permits, I will not go much further than that. Once you have license and permit, they will force you. You will need to have visas for your team, working permits and stuff. We can go through that in another moment. Then the next step, and this is very important one, the budget and the funds. And why I'm putting these two things separately, because they are different, and life and my experience have proven that they are very different. You budget your expedition, of course. Before going to the weekend in the beach with your family, you budget it. You simply have an idea, or you make yourself some calculation how much will cost you in fuel and the food and the drinks and the kids, and go and picking up this one here, or a tent that you want to take with you. Okay, same with the expeditions, you have to budget them. I have some very pessimistic friends, which are colleagues and people who do this as well, the same as me, that they have told me, yeah, Alex, no problem, man, you budget your expedition, then multiply by 2, and you will be nearby the half of what you will spend. Okay, that is not necessarily true. With experience, you learn more or less how much it will cost you. Pretty much, I mean, one of the things I use, and I'm telling you this for the ones who are in this position, or they will be in this position to budget your own expedition, is that you have to incorporate, because you work in the sea and you are so much weather dependent, you should incorporate a reasonable contingency budget. You have a contingency normally in any plan you do, you put a contingency, probably a 1 or 2% or something like that. Well, in the sea and working with shipwrecks, never go under the 10% of contingency, because you will need it. You will need it. The unexpected in this kind of expedition is expected. It will happen. What you think is maybe happen or maybe not, it will happen. In our expeditions, I always incorporate the 10% contingency that allows me for all these things, that it will happen, and the bad weathers and the illnesses and stuff you can deal with. This is your budget. And then are the funds you will get, because you're working either with an institution, the company, the investors, with whoever will put that money, or with your own money. Okay, normally, or at least in my experience, it's like a fraction of what you need. You made a great job doing your budget. You were really conscious that you are asking for the money you really need, and you may end up getting 45 or 50% of that. So you need to work also on changing your aims or adjusting your aims to the money that you are actually getting for the expedition, the funds. The ideal case that I think very few times happen is when the funding part would tell you, okay, you have this much to do this, and then you make the budget based on what you have. But this never happens. People think that, yeah, how much it will cost you, yeah, and then you ask you how much it will cost, and then there is not enough. Or okay,
Yeah.
so have that in mind. Put a big chunk of contingency, at least the 10%, because you will need it. It doesn't matter how much money do you get, you will have some unexpected things happening quite often. So that's for budgets and funds. I could be trashing everyone who has sent me budgets everywhere, but I will not, because
Let's
thanks
not.
to that, no, but thanks to that, we did the job. Then you have something which is very important, which is the team selection. So how do you select your team? First, you have to be very clear in which of the two types of licenses or expeditions you are putting together. If it's a survey and exploration expedition, or if it's an excavation expedition, because that will determine who you will bring along, who will go into that expedition. I mean, it makes no sense bringing a magnetometer expert to an excavation expedition if you will not use a magnetometer at that point.
But it doesn't make sense internally for you. I assume that the skill level and the necessity of the team also changes the requirement of the license that you can and should apply for?
Well,
does that make sense?
Yes, but in the ideal world, no. You should set your aim and your purpose, the purpose of your studies, and then bring a team according to that. Not the other way around. Not saying, okay, I have this and this and this guy, because you have a research objective and you have to reach it. So you have to look for the people. Of course, when I say this, I'm saying this because many times these expeditions are made for one project, one project, one wreck, or one exploration, and you put together a team and you do that. When you have the situation which I have, which is that I have been working for 30 some years with more or less the same team. My team has been shrinking and getting better and better and trained. You have a one-size-fits-all team in which I can use more or less the same team, because they are all multitaskers, or people who do many tasks and they know how to do it properly and they have much experience. So I cut almost 90% of my team. I can use it either in the survey and exploration expedition or the excavation expedition. Okay, but not everyone has the same opportunity or the same track record I have, or the chance of being working with the same team for such a long time. So you really need to pick and to choose the right people for the right tasks. There are different kind of expeditions. It doesn't matter. I mentioned in another episode, I know volunteers are attractive because most of the time we have money constraint and you want to get the volunteers, but be very clear to yourself what you need to do and which people will help you get into that point. It is quite different survey or exploration expedition to an expedition of excavation of a wreck site. Okay, so have this team selection. That is paramount. That is very important, because it's the team who will do the work. It doesn't matter. You could have all the funds in the world, unlimited funds, and you choose the wrong team, you most probably will burn that money senseless. So the same that with the team, it happened, I'm seeing it with the gear and the tools. Of course, if you are going to do an exploration, you don't have to have the same gear and the same tools that you will need for an excavation of a wreck. I mean, if you are exploring, you will need remote sensing equipment, you will need a certain sort of equipment and operators. And if you are excavating, you will most probably need water pumps and power on the seabed and different kind of tools. This is very important from the outset, because at least in my experience, most of these expeditions, remember I'm talking about land-based expeditions, most of these expeditions happen in places which are quite isolated, in countries which are normally quite large countries, and you are in a corner somewhere that you may not have, but normally we didn't. I can't remember. You don't work normally from the capital city of the country. You work from a small city or a small town or a small island, very far away. You don't have the logistics that you could have in a capital. For instance, we work in Mozambique, we work in the island of Mozambique, not in Maputo. If you need anything of your logistics that you forgot to bring with you, you have to ask. In Nampula, they have nothing, at least not at the time that we were there. So it's either Maputo or South Africa. In Indonesia, the same. If you would be working in Jakarta, great. You go, there are plenty of hardware stores where you can find anything. Okay, not in the places that we were. In Cape Verde, the same. If you are in the city of Praia, you may find something, but if you are in the north coast of the island of Mayo, you don't find anything. So you have to have it. You have to make sure you brought the right tool and the right equipment. This takes me to another point, which is a little bit of a mindset. You need to focus yourself and to try to create in your team, in your expedition, like a mini country. You have to be as self-sufficient as possible, because it has happened to me. Obviously, all this I'm telling you is because it already happened to me. It's not because
it's experience.
I didn't study it in any book. That I have been stopped for a week in an expedition, well, stopped from the main work we were doing because of a spare part that has to be ordered to Germany, and we were in Africa.
And that's a week of expenditure that wasn't accounted for, and delay for an extra week. God knows how long it takes you to get the missing part and then apply it to whatever you needed for it to actually work. Let's give it another extra day on top of that. That's already 11 days extra. Yeah, of course.
And that is without counting that it has happened to us as well, that you order one thing and you receive another one.
Of course.
And, well, okay, part of your job as a team leader or as a responsible for the team is to find another thing to do, so you simply don't sit and wait for a spare part. First, try not to get into that position. Once you have been for a while working in this, you already identify which are the parts of your gear and your tools that they break more often, or they are more fragile for the work you do. So you try to bring always the more stock you can before starting the expedition. So we have already all this in mind. You have to select a good headquarters or camp base for your land-based expedition. Why I mention this? Because this is obvious. Everyone will say, yeah, of course, Alex, you need to have a headquarters, a place, a house, a place where your team stays. Of course. But it's important that you pay attention to certain details, because even if the land-based expedition may look easier than the offshore expedition, they are not so. If you don't have the right house or a place where your team will rest and eat and clean themselves, and data processing, remember, you are in an archaeological expedition. You are not in a weekend with friends having fun in a beach. You generate data every day and you have to process it.
Yeah, there's also computer work and logistics and a lot of admin to do.
There is a lot of admin and office work, so you must find a place that has something as similar as to an office as you can. A part of this place, it must have an office. I mean, it may not have the conditions that you would have in a city,
of course,
but you need it. And this I make a big difference here and big separation between a headquarters, as I call when you rent a house or you go to a place which is reasonably nearby your operation area, and the camp base. Because, tell you guys, you have seen in the many movies, I have seen in many movies, archaeological expeditions with people living in tents by the beach, under a nice coconut tree, beautiful images. All right, we did that at least once. once in the north coast of Boa Vista in Cape Verde. And I can tell you that that is a total night. You do that when you are very young, when you have friends for 2 or 3 days, and you just need to go there, chill, and have nice stories to tell your friends on Monday. But to go there to do a job and to produce results and to be conscious about the money you're spending, that is almost never a good option. Some may disagree with me. Some of you may have positive experiences doing that. But
and please share them
please
on the comments.
tell it in the comments. Let me know if you actually succeed in having a camp base for longer than 3 or 4 days, because my experience was awful. I mean, just the paperwork
Yeah,
you need to do. You can't forget it. It's all a backlog until you arrive back to civilization. Then the computer that you took with you is full of sand. Everything. Filling up the bottles, the damage to the equipment is incredible. Okay, so I will talk more about the expedition with a proper headquarters, with the house or something where your team can, because remember, resting is as important as working. If you don't create the conditions for the team to eat properly and to rest properly, you will have a very inefficient team in no time. In a week.
100%. And this is a very, you can argue this for all jobs, but this job specifically is very physical and intellectual, but definitely very physical. For anyone that has been in a body of water for several hours in a row, even when you're not doing anything, and by the way, diving is not doing anything, but even when you're just chilling in the water by the beach for 3 hours, you go home and you're tired, you eat half of your fridge and you fall asleep. So imagine that as your actual job and activity, and you don't get the setup to regenerate and to recharge properly. Yeah, it's a useless team, or a 30% capacity team instead of 100%.
And you want to avoid that. So in the moment in which you need to select the headquarters where your land operation will be based, please give a second thought always to these aspects. Okay, is this not only the cheaper one that I can find, but it's the better one for the team? Try to look for that balance. That is very important, because that will make a difference between an efficient or an inefficient team. And people angry at you, and you angry at yourself. And the money that you save in the rent of that place is not showing up in the performance of the team. So yeah, have that in mind. Also, and something which is very important, and some teams or groups which I know tend to either underestimate or simply forget, is that if you are in an excavation expedition, remember that we talk about both, okay? You are in the excavation expedition or with a license that allows you to retrieve some artifacts from the seabed. Before doing anything, you have to find if there is a conservation facility or a conservation center, a place to conserve those artifacts, or at least to have them stabilized in the meantime that they go to a proper conservation center. Why do I say this? Because as I mentioned, you normally don't work in the capitals of the countries. So in the capital city, there is always a conservation facility somewhere, because they conserve their artwork and their antiques.
There will be a lab.
There will be a lab. Yeah. But where you are, normally there is none. There is no need for that. There is no need for that. So you have to make one. Most of the cases, I would say, we almost got to build these conservation centers from scratch. And it's not totally from scratch, because we, as a part of collaboration with the government, we have been given buildings or houses or places to, normally they are in bad conditions, so they are abandoned or they are not in use in that moment. So you have to make a conservation center. And you have to make a conservation center for the conservation of the artifacts and for storage of the artifacts. You have to do that. Otherwise, you don't take any artifact out of the water. Simple as that. There is a saying, I don't remember where I saw it first time, but I like it and I like to repeat it, that it says that excavation without conservation is vandalism. So either you have your conservation ready before you move any object from the seabed. Leave it there. It has been there for 300 years. It can wait a little bit more until you're ready to do something good to it, not bad.
100%.
So taking it out, conserve it, preserve it for the future generations. Don't just take it out and then try to figure what to do with it. That it cannot happen. The same for the land-based expedition. You need to identify, even before start working, your workshop. You will need a workshop. Trust me, you need a place where you have to store your gear, you have to fill up your bottles, you have to be repairing all the time, you have to be repairing everything. It's incredible the amount of repair that you have to do in an expedition, and mainly in the land-based expeditions. And also one point in which, as we are talking about land-based expeditions, one point that you should not forget is about security. You need security inland, in your workshop, in your conservation center, because like it or not, believe it or not, in less than a week, everyone around will know what you're doing. Everyone will know what you're doing. And from that, everyone, 99% will think you are bringing up tons of gold and silver.
True. To be also fair to them, this is the most inconspicuous activity in the world. I don't think you can be running around an expedition without people noticing you. So there's no way of doing this stealthily.
No, and there is no point
No
in
need.
doing it either. But
Yeah.
be aware, because this will happen. I mean,
Yeah.
if you work in, as I have mentioned, in the capital city of a country, and for a very unusual situation, you have a very interesting wreck in front of the city, okay, you could ask for police protection or for
Yeah.
guards
Sure.
to guard your storehouse and your conservation center. Okay, in the places I'm talking, you don't have that. So you really need to have that into account in the moment of selecting either where you will make your conservation center, where you make your storage facility, and where you make your workshop. Because all these, I'm not talking only about gold and silver, outboard engines, zodiacs, dive equipment, bottles, all these are things that in remote places, they are precious. People need them. And they could feel the temptation of taking some out of your control. I have had many problems, but if they say one lead weight, one these weights that you, it's already a problem. So we have to make new ones. And well, as I mentioned, and I'm going back a little bit now, I mentioned about how proactive and how careful you should be in having enough stock of the gear you need and the tools. In the case that you are in an excavation expedition and you have to adapt or make a conservation facility, please remember your reactives, the chemicals. You need to bring all that. The job of the conservator, which I always observe in awe, because they are like magicians to me, it requires some very particular chemicals. You cannot just solve everything with chlorhydric acid and an aspirin. No, you need very specific stuff, and you better have them. You will not find them there locally. You will not find, you may source there one or the other, but you may not find most of them. Be very, very careful with that.
They might not even be super easy to find willy-nilly, even in capital cities. I don't think the amount that your chemists might need, I don't know that they would even know where to buy those things, even if you guys were in the capitals of each city. So it's something that you need to plan in advance and bring yourself in advance, yes, I would say.
Well, I tell you, to reinforce that, I tell you, forget even about the capitals. Most of these very specific products, you have to bring them from Europe or from the States.
And that's it. Yeah, sure.
Or
Asia.
Or Asia. If you're in Asia, okay, from Tokyo. But in Europe, it's not like Europe. You have to bring them from Germany.
See, I was just about to say, maybe it's not even every place in Europe. It's Germany.
It's not in every place.
The 4 or 5 guys. Yeah.
Some of these products are as specific as that. So you better be very well prepared beforehand. Okay, most of the time, or I would say 95% of the time, you don't know what you will find. But
Yeah.
you may have an idea, okay, I'm working in a 16th century shipwreck coming from Spain, and it has normally this sort of cargo, so I better have these reactives, these chemicals, and these tools ready for the conservation center. Then you find a different thing, okay, you have to adapt and you have to order these products. But yes, have that in mind, because I didn't mention it when I was talking about the gear and the tools, because I haven't talked about the conservation center yet. But now that I mention it, yes, please have that in mind. So we ended up with security. You must make sure that you have enough security, because as I said, people tend to fantasize with what you're finding and what you're taking out of the sea. So pay attention to the security, because people tend to blow up or to fantasize the things you're finding in the sea. They don't know, and if they don't know, they will imagine always something much bigger and much more important and richer and more expensive. So they could believe that you have tons of precious materials in that warehouse, and they may be tempted to break in and take some out. So don't underestimate that point. Security is important. That in land-based expedition is very important. Remember, you will be living
And
in
in
a
any
community.
country.
Yeah, no, in any country,
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
let's say in every country, it will happen the same. You will be living in a community and not in the capital of the country. You will be living in an isolated place. Normally, it's a small community. Small communities in every country, they are less helped by central governments. So normally they have much more needs. So be very careful with that. Do not underestimate security of your gear and your
Artifacts.
people, your artifacts and your people. So have that in mind. I know that some of you, because I know many of you personally, or our community, you work in places where this is just simply not the point. But in most of the places are. And who knows if tomorrow you will have the need to conduct an expedition in X place. Just have it in mind. And now that I have explained more or less the general terms of the land-based expedition, let me summarize in a way the pros and the cons of the land-based expedition in comparison to the offshore expedition. I mentioned in the beginning that some people tend to believe that land-based expeditions are cheaper, because chartering a boat for an offshore expedition is normally the bigger chunk of your budget. It is normally very expensive, but have in mind that having a boat, it will put together a lot of the other expenses that you have separately in land, because having a house, you still have to rent this and there, and the workshop, and in the boat you have everything together. So do not decide to make a land-based expedition simply because it looks cheaper, because it's not. And now we'll tell you why also. Not only because the boat is more efficient as a unit, not only because of that. In the pros, well, the pros we can all understand. I mean, if it's bad weather, if it's really bad weather, it comes a hurricane or a typhoon or something, you're in land, okay? People in land also suffer from a hurricane. Trust me, it's better to be in land than be in the sea. That part is good. Normally, you have better conditions to do the office work, to process the data, to work in an office-like environment. Normally, you have better conditions. First, because it's not moving. It is stable. You could have a great boat with a nice office, because I have had boats with great offices, so you are very comfortable, but the boat moves. To perform a task in the computer, processing data that requires your concentration, it is convenient that you're not seasick, and that in land happens less. Normally has better resting conditions for the team. I just talking about the pros here, And one which is very important is the better communication possibilities with home. The team members, everyone needs to call home, know how things are going. When I started this work, we were all very young, all of us. Most of the team was very young. So yeah, you could spend 3 months offshore and you may lose a girlfriend or a boyfriend, yeah,
Yeah.
tough luck. But we grew older and we have families and you have kids and you have responsibilities and there are plenty of problems which you leave. When you go to an expedition, you leave them there, but they are not alone. You have to be in contact. So an expedition inland, it has better chances for communication. Obviously, nowadays, communication is less and less a problem. I'm talking by experience because I have started doing this many years ago when there was absolutely no chance of communication, even inland. But then when communication started developing inland, you could call home, you could talk to your wife, your husband, your kids, to your loved ones. And when you were in the boat, you wouldn't, because you need then a satellite phone, which costs a fortune to call anyone. And then you give people 3 minutes, talk 3 minutes, call your people and talk for 3 minutes. Okay, that makes it hard. So yes, land-based expeditions will have this as an advantage. So far, I think these are the pros. And then it comes the cons, because not everything is good in the land-based expedition. First, the team gets very easily distracted. You are in a town, you have bars, people finish working at 7:30 or 8 in the evening, let's go have a drink. And then you find yourself chasing your team around whatever town you are because they got dispersed in the night. You're laughing, but this is serious. I am super happy when I'm in a boat and I have everyone in the boat and you have no option than chat in the evening between us.
No opportunity for nobody to wonder off. No, I'm laughing because I find them funny, but by no means am I surprised. Don't get it wrong.
Well, okay, just that part for the team. Then another of the cons of the land-based expeditions, as I mentioned recently, the security for your stuff. If you are in a boat working offshore, you have everything on board, everything is more secure because you have less chances that someone comes or try to break in or steal stuff. So security is also an issue in the land-based expedition. One thing that we should not forget is illnesses. When you are in land, you are more in contact with a lot of illness that in the sea you will not have. You will have no mosquitoes offshore, so you will not get any malaria or dengue or many other of the diseases that you can get being in land. I mean, these are the more famous ones, but the stomach problems.
Exactly.
Because then you go around and you start eating whatever because people are curious. I love eating everything which I don't know, and you can end up with food intoxication many times. So these are things that when you are inland, you are not totally in a controlled environment. People are free to go wherever they want and you can get ill. So this is an advantage that an offshore expedition will have over a land-based expedition that is a little bit safer for the team members. And also the gear, in general, the gear we use in a land-based expedition, it will deteriorate faster. The sand from the ground, the compressor, even if you prepare very nicely your workshop, you normally don't have the right place to put your compressor and to fill up your bottles and to store your dive gear. They will be with sand or dust or humidity. In a ship, normally these things are better sorted and the equipment suffer much less in a ship than inland. So I don't know if you guys feel that I didn't talk about something that you have experienced or I should have go a little bit deeper in some aspect. Please let me know. Write it in the comments because most probably I will make an episode about the offshore expeditions and there will be a very good chance to answer or to touch the points which I simply forgot. Because I'm talking basically about my experience. I know other team leaders that have different experiences. They may come and say, hey, Alex, and what about this? Oh, I forgot that. Or I didn't know. Let's talk about it. Tell me. And we exchange. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. It's really, expeditions for me is such a challenging subject. It's something which is very challenging doing it properly, that I like to talk about it. I like to discuss it, because every idea is always welcome to get your expeditions better. So if you guys like the video, enjoy the video, leave it a like, share it with your friends, or share it with someone that you think that might find it interesting, and let's keep on diving.